Thank you, our moderator, Sharon, and thanks to Africa Media Science Center for hosting us this mid-morning to share what new knowledge is coming out of the science work which we do in the background in the whole topic of climate change as it concerns our very own human welfare and what challenges it is posing. And hopefully, the key point then is what way forward in the context of getting out of this problem. Ladies and gentlemen, I will just say take us through the current science knowledge in the context of impacts of climate change, and then moderator Sharon has sufficiently introduced me, so I will not repeat that. But just to give us a little bit of where we are coming from, I am a panel member and therefore contributing lead scientist in the science work going into the intergovernmental panel on climate change analysis, reports and status. And what I'm going to be sharing with us today is a follow-up of what we did in the physical science basis of the current level, accredited as level of climate change. Today we will be also strongly focusing on impacts, impacts and what adaptations are we doing, and of course bearing in mind our vulnerability. And the moderator has put it very well. In Africa, or even in Kenya for that matter, we are one of the hottest spots when it comes to the sad stories of what actually climate change can do, and adverse climate can do, which is very detrimental to our own welfare. I want us to recap from the physical science that certainly the last almost 1 decade, this is actually really the period in early 2000s to the present. We have beaten all records when it comes to the level of the climate warming. We are almost far into the wood, because like the current warming is actually very close to one. And then this is unprecedented. This has never occurred in the history of the planet Earth since those time scales, be they geological, be they centuries, So we are much in the woods, and actually this is one of the greatest key messages which we wanted to bring out strongly in the physical science basis assessment, which we released just about, we did that in August last year. Look at some of the key indicators of and one day the catastrophic climate change. We can point here surface temperatures, and when you are using surface temperatures, usually here we are looking at the minimum temperatures and what is happening to the minimum temperatures. And these pictures, people can take them. They are not copyrighted. They are public resource. So be free to use them for whatever purpose you want to use them. But what you are seeing here is that from the current level of warming, which is approximately 1 degree above the pre-industrial or the period of when temperatures are not being disturbed at all by any human influence. And when you look at what is projected to be happening about in the next 2 decades or so, centered in the 2050s, you see that yeah, we are very much within the 1.5 degree centigrade warming, and of course much higher warming by the end of the century. And of course, this ties very much with the Paris agreement, you know, that if we are going to be in a safer world, then of course higher temperatures mean disaster. And of course, in the climate system, for example, ice is very important. And if you look at the panel B there, that plot there, the very worrying threat of glaciers and ice. Ice is very important in the climate system because it will play the role of modulating, you know, conditions and keeping the planet sufficiently cold, and of course maintaining the gradients between the equatorial areas and the higher latitudes, gradients which are very important for driving the climate processes. So the loss of ice, continental ice, the glaciers, very worrying. And I think if you ever visit the northern countries, myself I've been privileged to live in Norway for quite a while, and when you visit the fields there, and then you see what you talk about. It's now mainly all those rocks. They call that country the country of naked geology. Now it is rocks, other than rocks covered by glaciers. Quite worrying. And of course, when it comes to ecosystems, and some of us may not know the importance of the ocean, for example, in our livelihoods, and the phenomena of ocean acidification becoming very serious. So we use this panel C to just make this particular point, and you can see, of course, currently the oceans are nearly alkaline in terms of chemistry, but you can see the projected trend there, the migration or the shift towards acidity. I think in chemistry we usually use the acidity scale on the decreasing side. That's why we are drawing this plot like that. And of course, then another very serious threat, of course, is the implications of the sea level rise, the sea level rise. And of course, like currently, the global oceans are very much close to about almost 0.4, actually 0.3 above the pre-industrial sea level. And you can see by the let's like today, we can focus ourselves on the time window centered about the 2050s, just to talk about the next 2 decades or so. And you can see the sea level nearly rising, edging towards half a meter. And of course, this is a serious threat. It has all manner of implications. Just to put this more into context, like for example myself, when I was a bit of a younger person, I used to think that the people who live in Mombasa, have fresh water all over the place. I think I was just about standard 4 or 5 in school, so I didn't know nothing about the provision of water, only to realize that ocean water is not directly usable by man, in terms of consumption. Of course, it plays a key role in our livelihoods, the marine life, the ecosystems, of course, the fish we get, and of course, should the seawater come into contact with the freshwater systems, like the storm surges, then you have contamination, you have salinity increasing, so you have all manner of problems, and therefore quite a serious concern. And of course, the threat to the cost of settlements, and I'm sure like when you are talking about this, you can actually remember our colleagues like in the Dutch who live well below sea level. These things are of very serious concern to the livelihoods. So now let's come back to working group 2. Working panel 2 in IPCC basically focuses on impacts and what we should then be doing, informed by these impacts in the context of adaptation and then mitigation of climate change. And today, more or less, the key message is on coming from the impacts, adaptation, and what is the likely pathway. One of the key messages is this, and then because the release was done, we did it on Monday, and the YouTube is available. I'm not going to repeat much of it because it is open source also. I'll put the link into this PPT, and people can play it. I will pick a few key highlights of that press release, which we did last 2 days ago, as a matter of fact. And this is the key message. The climate threat change is actually, unequivocal. It is a threat to the well-being of each and every every human being on the planet. Very, very much worrying is that it is actually a much of a threat to all aspects of human welfare, human existence. Therefore, this means that what we should be urging and what should be being done to do something about the climate change. That means make the situation better. That is in the context of mitigation, and also do something about slowing and eventually reversing the situations. That is that is adaptation. That should be done pretty fast because the systems which support livelihoods, we didn't create them actually. The natural systems, they have evolved, and we can go to another topic later on that particular one. But the point is that the adverse changes, the adverse warming, is too rapid to be taken seriously. And I want to believe, like the effort we have as humanity have put to contain a pandemic, if that was done for climate change, then gradually the benefits will be accrued. So the time window of action is actually not much. It is slow. So if you proceed to the next slide, then, and then of course, I'm going to skip a lot of the background about the impacts. And just to point out, for example, that when you have extreme events, like let us come back here home, and here home in Kenya, I do believe that the northern half of Kenya is still under very serious drought. Very serious drought. Drought actually, which as now, this is almost the second running year, and we can recall that that almost 2 years ago, that particular region was actually inundated by locusts, and of course they might have contributed to this. But what we are saying is that increasing heat stress and the droughts, for example, have all manner of unwanted bad impacts. For example, on our food systems, the low productivity, low yields. Low yields meaning that whatever need to available resource like food we have now, that is required and needed by too many people. Therefore, the prices go up, and this one is a real challenge we have in Kenya, and of course reduced productivity, and therefore as implications, it means that, unfortunately, it means that we more or less work from hand to mouth. Therefore, our resource base as households becomes very, very eroded. There are all manner of local effects. We go to the communities. We can explore further, and these are some of the detailed aspects of the climate change impacts, which we want to use to increase this knowledge of what are those disaster consequences. You come to the cities, for example, and you have this unsustained development, then you have the flood problems, you have devastation of settlements, and therefore very, 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 very serious conditions. If you go to the next slide, narrator, what we have done in this particular scientific undertaking, which we have done for the last nearly 5 years, of course, is to use the current scientific understanding, understanding and linkages between disciplines. We actually get out of our disciplines from science to even social sciences to arts, and therefore understand the problems in a transdisciplinary sense. And this gives us, and has actually given us, an opportunity to understand things much better. We understand now the challenges between we understand the challenge, of course, and most important, we understand the interconnections between the risks. For example, what climate causes and its impacts. How does it, for example, impact to livelihoods, to ecosystems, to biodiversity? And we are also aware that what we are proposing to be done should also be done in a way which is sustainable and in a way which makes sense. And this is where the moderator pointed out, like the current high-level policy outcomes conference happening in UNEP as we talk. Because if humanity is living in a way which is unsustainable, over exploitation of resources, then of course we are heading to doom, because we become unsustainable. So there are limits as to what you can do as human beings, even to adaptation itself. So human society actions and the behaviors, and of course we understand now why the huge losses, why the damages, and what impacts, and we want now to move in the direction of the other circle there, the climate resilient development, and where we are the risks like health implications are not going to wipe all of us out. We also need our life support systems to be healthy enough. We want a good planet. We want to be in harmony with nature as we live. And actually, if humanity lives and does things which actually are not in harmony with nature, then of course there is a lot to be concerned about. Next slide. So we understand better now the science, and this is just to highlight some of the impacts. And for example, the whole concept, and I need to remember that as a city is supposed to develop, and we have all these nice looking, very beautiful skyscrapers when these projects are finished. Actually, I think this particular city, I guess very well, because I've also been traveling a lot. This particular city is an African city, actually just to the north of us. The rest you can ask me later, the particular city, but it's even very close to us. This is not Nairobi, of course, but it's very close to us. The climate change actually combines with unsustainable use of natural resources. We destroy habitats, as we grow our cities. And I think it is also common knowledge that within our region, for example, the Great Lakes, urbanization is quite rapid. So there are these bad practices which we must know, and we must know that some of the bad practices which we must deal with are those which, of course, in the whole context of development is actually unsustainable development, because we are not minding about the welfare or the usefulness of nature in our livelihoods, in our resources. So we must be able to do things and activities in a way which, of course, ensures that we'll continue to have water, for example. We'll continue to have watersheds. We'll continue to have our forest ecosystems. We'll continue to have, the services which we get as humanity from nature. Africa, East Africa, Kenya, we are very much in this category. I do recall a few years ago, I think the last drought, not this particular I mentioned, but the previous one, reporters will go to drought-prone areas, and if goats see you with just that half-liter bottle of water, together with the people, they are all fighting for that half-liter bottle of water. Of course, you can then understand. So the water situation, very, very important, very important, and we are very much vulnerable, just like this particular. So I think this particular picture it must be ours. What is the other overriding impact? And of course, the major concern which we bring out in this assessment is of course the loss of diversity and ecosystems at various warming levels. For example, at 1.5 degree warming and at 3 degree warming, as you can see in these plots, these maps. And of course, what is of concern there now is the extent of the loss of biodiversity. And biodiversity is very important, and I think biologists and crop scientists are in the core can expand this far in terms of what does nature entail. But we capture the picture on the right hand side. The nature is crucial to our services. To just make this particular point, and you know, the role of insects, for example, the bees and other insects, you know, marine life, disappearing coral reefs, for example, in our coastal area along East Africa, and therefore the threat to life, you know, and all manner of impacts. I also just want to bring this a little bit home, so that I also prompt people's thoughts. A few weeks ago, I think maybe it was like early January or something like that, we actually got these stories, and these are true, that you know we are getting farmers now having to to manually go to their farms, like to maize farms, and actually almost check the stock by stock, plant by plant, so that the pollen can disperse. Is that something which is sustainable? So manual pollination. Of course, the wind is still helping a lot, but atmospheric circulations are affected very adversely by climate warming, the temperature increasing, and of course reducing pressure gradients, and therefore having very negative implications. Another one which I wanted to bring about, which actually I think is also still somewhere in media, you can Google it. Actually, myself, I happen to be when I'm in my role, I also go and check what my bees are doing. So I have an apiary actually in this area, and there is this story about the people in Baringo. The acacia is actually still flowering nowadays, but you can go there and find out how much honey they get nowadays. You'll be surprised. And not much. Even in my apiary myself, I am also a witness to this. Out of about 10 beehives, I think only about 5, the last time I checked, which is just a few weeks ago, are still, the colonies are. So we are in a serious situation when it comes to the supporting systems. So just the whole topic and the impact of the ecosystems loss, afflicting insects, for example, and what insects do to our lives in terms of the positive roles they play is actually very worrying. We can do wrong things. We can do adaptation, For example, we can do adaptation, like, let's remain just on that slide because the details are not up in the next slide. We can do adaptation activities like boreholes, for example. Boreholes done and informed by a robust scientific survey as to the sustainability and the resource, the aquifer information, and we have very, very substantial consequences when it comes to what this does to surface water, what this does to the soil moisture, what this does to the surface ecosystems of the regions. And then I'm sure off the cuff we can share some sad stories about those kind of bad experiences, and therefore bad and sustainable and planned and adaptation practices. So in other words, practices which conserve nature, which conserve ecosystems, which, for example, ensure that you retain and you keep a healthy service, a green city, blue spaces in cities. This is good practice. And with some of these adaptation practices actually work, and work very well. Next slide. And what is required therefore is those which work can also and should also be accelerated so that they play a useful role in terms of what communities gain out of those good practices. Accelerating good and well planned adaptations which are in harmony with the natural systems requires that there is very good regulation. This is where political commitment comes in. This is where government comes in for purposes of ensuring that policies are in place. There is enforcement. We also need very good institutional frameworks with clear goals of what we are doing, what we are doing it, where to take us. We need also to find our priorities very well. We need to know, and we need to have in place as who does what in terms of responsibilities. But we also have to keep enhancing the knowledge of the impacts and what risks these impacts pose when it comes to the actual entry into our very own existence. And going into details, it also means that we must be able to do very good monitoring. So this is actually continuous. We must learn and we must evaluate what adaptation measures are enabling societies to achieve. If, for example, it is an afforestation program, for example, if it is a practice like agroforestry. So I said the details people can play in the rural areas. If it's agroforestry will do many things. Agroforestry will actually address some good practice adaptation. It also links adaptation to mitigation. Not only are you making and slowing, like trapping greenhouse gas, maybe the major one carbon dioxide, but also you are providing livelihoods. So you are not only addressing mitigation also, but the outcome of that is trickling down to good resource for food, for example. So it is even going down to addressing the sustainability and therefore attainment of those sustainable development goals. So it's very, very, very clear. If you don't want to make it complicated, you want to talk very simple, you want to keep our messages very, very clear without having to go into a lot of details. So people will have these particular resources and therefore you get out of poverty. We also need to know that adaptation, which of course keeps our resources like energy, more use of renewable energy, and of course good clean transport mechanisms helps us to attain goal number 3, for example. So the details are there in the report. So what we are saying here is that adaptation measures which are positive, which are sustainable, actually lead to actually almost what we can define as a climate resilient development. Climate resilient development. For Africa, for example, in the assessment report, I just picked this particular burning ELBA, as we call it, to just show the impacts of loss of biodiversity at the various warming levels, mortality and morbidity from heat, and of course infectious diseases afflicting vegetation, afflicting human lives, afflicting life in general, the extent, and also the other impact of like the reduced food productivity, like crops, for example, or even when you go to the water, oceans, and even lakes becoming more acid, the amount of fish which actually you are going to be losing as we move into the future. And these, we only use them to send the message that as we talk about sustaining and containing global warming to below 1.5, we do not want humanity in the next decades, by the 2050s, to be beyond, so that we are now always and every time in the high danger zone, and of course then maybe it will be our sunset days. Then of course we will sit in the planet earlier, and of course then the next generations will be at greater risk. So this is what is of interest to us, that the situation is bleak. It is very bad, and we have to do something. The point here is that adaptation has everything to do with the vulnerability, and you can pick details of this in the Africa fact sheet document. I've also put a link to this. It is just about 2 pages, so it's very, very short document. And the next page, now we can give our conclusion remark. The conclusion remark made here is, where should adaptation take us? And the message is, we should go the climate resilient development. We should be able to know that if we are in a world which is currently at a very low resilience, very high climate risk, we should then move into the direction of a world which is highly resilient, which is low in climate risks. And that encompasses what we are doing to reduce like greenhouse gases, that is mitigation, what we are doing to reduce the risks, that is adaptation. And the two of them working together will go towards our collective joint efforts in living in harmony with nature. For example, the biodiversity, and therefore we will actually be able to attain those sustainable development goals. Thank you.